What would you do when your own wife tries to auction you off in front of 30 neighbors, and someone actually raises their hand? We were crammed inside the Stone Ridge Community Center arguing about HOA fees when she stood up, flashed a smug smile, and said, "Who wants to buy a slightly used husband?" The whole neighborhood froze. My self-respect hit the floor. And before I could breathe, Riley, the 26-year-old girl from the end of the block, raised her hand and said, "I'll take him." Amber's smile vanished instantly. And that was the moment my marriage shattered in front of everyone. If you've ever felt disrespected like that, hit subscribe and follow me, so you don't miss what comes next. Before that night at the community center, I was just a regular man in his 40s trying to do the right thing. My name's Marcus Hale. I'm a senior project coordinator at North Star Construction. Fancy way of saying I spend my days making sure other people's plans actually get built, on time, under budget. I've been busting my ass for years to keep a roof over our heads and the lights on. My wife Amber works in real estate. She loves beautiful kitchens, staged living rooms, perfect Instagram angles. She likes being seen. Compliments, attention, eyes on her. That's her fuel. We live in a gated community up in Frisco, Texas. Perfect lawns. HOA letters if your trash can stays out too long. The kind of place where people care more about the color of your fence than what kind of person you are. Me? I never wanted much. A quiet house, a wife who had my back, maybe a couple of lazy Sundays where nobody's yelling about something stupid. I wasn't asking for much. Just not to be the joke in my own marriage. And that's exactly what I became. So, go back with me to that HOA meeting at Stone Ridge. Folding chairs scraped the floor. Paper agendas crinkled in tired hands. Mr. Patterson droned on about parking violations and pool rules like he was addressing Congress. People were half asleep, half annoyed. I sat near the front, actually listening, because that's who I am. If I live somewhere, I care. I show up. I speak up about the budget, the security gate, the stuff everyone else complains about but never fixes. Behind me, Amber and her friend Lauren had parked themselves in the back row. I could hear them whispering, laughing under their breath. Not just about the neighbors, about me, the way I talked, the way I took things too seriously. To her, I was the boring husband who cared too much about spreadsheets and not enough about being fun. I turned around for a second and caught her looking at me like I was some uptight dad at a kid's party. She smirked, rolled her eyes to Lauren, and in that tiny look, I felt it. She didn't respect me, not as a man, not as a husband. And then she opened her mouth. And then she opened her mouth. Ms. Green from the HOA had just finished explaining they were short 15 grand for the pool and new security gate. People were already annoyed, whispering about higher fees, tighter rules, more money out of their pockets. That's when Amber stood up. She smoothed her dress, put on that smug little smile she saves for when she thinks she's being clever, and said, "Marcus takes up way too much space at home anyway. Maybe I should trade him in to help with the budget shortfall." A couple of nervous laughs, then silence. She looked around like she was crushing a stand-up set, then added, louder this time, "Anyone interested in a slightly used husband?" And the room just froze. 30 of my neighbors, people I waved to, people whose mail I've picked up, whose trash cans I've pulled in when they forgot. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck. My self-respect hit the floor and kept falling. In that moment, I wasn't her husband. I wasn't a man. I was the punchline. And then, from the left side of the room, someone answered her. A hand went up. Not Amber's. Not some drunk neighbor trying to play along. Riley's. Riley Carter, 26, lives at the end of the block. Works from home as a graphic designer. Quiet, keeps to herself, always polite when we pass by. She lifted her hand like she was volunteering for a committee and said, clear as day, "I'll take him. I value people who actually contribute, instead of complaining about everything." You could feel the whole room shift. A couple of people chuckled, but this time it wasn't at me. I heard somebody mutter "good for him" under their breath. A few heads turned toward Amber, waiting to see what she'd do now that her little joke had backfired. Her smile cracked first, then her eyes. Her face went from smug to furious in 2 seconds. Cheeks red, jaw tight, eyes shooting daggers at Riley, and at me, like I'd somehow planned this. She grabbed her bag, spun on her heel, and stormed out of the room, the door slamming behind her hard enough to rattle the glass. She walked out like she was the one who'd been betrayed. And I just sat there, staring at the door, realizing this wasn't the beginning of a problem. It was proof the problem had been there for a long time. When the door slammed behind Amber, everyone pretended nothing happened. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat and went right back to talking about pool chemicals and security cameras, like my wife hadn't just tried to put me on Facebook Marketplace in real life. I stayed in my chair. I could have chased her out to the parking lot, started another scene, begged her to explain why her husband was suddenly a community joke. But I knew exactly how that would go. Somehow it would all turn into how I embarrassed her. I stared at the agenda in my hands and thought, in a marriage, the bare minimum is respect. Just basic respect. I wasn't asking for romance every night. I wasn't asking for constant praise. But I sure as hell wasn't signing up to be public entertainment. One thought kept circling in my head. I'm not your punching bag. Not tonight. So I raised my hand, made a couple of comments about the budget, tried to sound normal while my ears were still burning. My marriage had just cracked in public, and I stayed to talk about pool chemicals. Because for the first time, I was more afraid of going home than staying there. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the house was dark. Amber's SUV wasn't in the garage. No lights on, no TV, nothing. Just quiet. I walked into the kitchen, dropped my keys on the counter, and that's when my phone buzzed. Don't want to see your face tonight. Staying at Lauren's. Maybe your new girlfriend can cook you dinner. I just stood there in the middle of the kitchen, reading it over and over. This woman had just auctioned me off in front of 30 people, and somehow she'd managed to twist it so she was the wounded one, and I was the problem. That's when the anger cut through the humiliation. You ever hit that point where something inside you just flips? Where you stop trying to be understanding and start seeing things for what they really are? I typed one line. No emojis. No explanation. Speaking of boyfriends, how's Chase doing these days? I hit send, and in that moment, I knew I'd just fired a shot straight at the secret she never thought I'd say out loud. It didn't take long. Maybe 3 minutes after I sent that text about Chase, my phone lit up. Then again. Same name on the screen each time. Amber. I let it ring until the third call before I picked up. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She snapped, but her voice wasn't angry first. It was scared. I could hear a car door slam, the beeping of her SUV starting up, the engine roaring like she was throwing it into drive before she'd even shut the door. I leaned against the counter, calm in a way I hadn't felt in months. It means, I said slowly, I'm not as oblivious as you think. Silence. Just her breathing hard through the phone, turn signal clicking in the background, tires on pavement. Marcus, if you're trying to... We need to talk, I cut in. She started to say my name again, but I was done hearing excuses through a speaker. I hung up. In that moment, she stopped being the victim of a bad joke and started being the one who'd just been caught. It didn't take her long to get home. The front door flew open so hard it hit the wall. Amber stumbled in, makeup smeared, chest heaving like she'd sprinted from the car. She didn't even shut the door all the way. I don't know what you think you know, but I know, I said, cutting straight through her sentence, that your phone lights up at 11:30 every Tuesday night. She froze. I know you've been taking calls in the garage for the last 4 months, I continued, my voice steady. I know you suddenly got real precious about deleting your call history on Sundays, and I know Chase Walker moved back to Frisco in March. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I watched her eyes flick back and forth, like she was trying to find a version of the story that didn't make her look exactly like what she'd been. That dark garage flashed in my mind, me walking past it some nights, hearing her voice drop low, door half closed, telling myself not to be paranoid, telling myself to trust my wife. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was laying out the facts. She finally found her voice. It's not what you think, Amber blurted out, the line every guilty person keeps in their back pocket. Her eyes were darting all over the room, not at me, at the floor, the counter, the door, like she was looking for an exit hatch from the conversation. Then tell me what it is, I said. No yelling, no cussing, just a simple question that didn't leave her much room to dance. I took a breath. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like this. You humiliated me in public tonight, and you've been having some kind of emotional thing with your ex behind my back for months. Amber snapped back, louder than before. That's ridiculous. Chase and I are just friends. There it was. We're just friends. You ever hear a phrase so hollow it actually hurts? That line felt like the lid slamming shut on my trust. Not because I believed her, but because it proved she still thought I was stupid enough to. I looked at her and realized something ugly. She wasn't fighting for our marriage. She was fighting to keep her story alive, and I was done pretending not to see the difference. I took a step closer, not to intimidate her, just so she had to actually look at me. Amber, I said quietly, physical isn't the only way to cheat. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. Staying up late to text him while I'm asleep upstairs? Taking phone calls in the garage so I won't hear your voice change? Telling him you're unhappy? That you feel trapped? That you miss what you had? Her eyes glossed over, tears starting to form. But it wasn't remorse. It was the look of somebody mad they'd been caught. You've been sharing our problems, our fights, our money stress, our bedroom issues, with another man, I said. Not a counselor, not a pastor, your ex. I let that sit. You've been sharing yourself with him in ways that should be reserved for your husband. That's not just friends. That's an emotional affair. That's cheating. A tear slid down her cheek. She covered her face with her hands like she was the victim in all this. But I could see it clear as day. She wasn't crying because of what she'd done to me. She was crying because the game was over. There's a point where talking in circles just becomes another kind of lie. I looked at Amber, still standing there in the kitchen, mascara streaked, breathing hard, and I realized if I didn't draw a line right then, I never would. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to give me full access. Your phone, call logs, texts, social media, all of it. No screenshots, no, let me explain first, no editing. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. If there's really nothing going on, I added, then this shouldn't be a problem, right? Her mouth opened and closed, outrage fighting with fear. That's controlling, she said. You're being insane. I shook my head. What's insane is sneaking around with your ex and then acting like I'm the bad guy for asking questions. Then I said it, the thing that changed everything between us. Either we have complete honesty starting right now, or you can pack a bag and stay at Lauren's permanently. Silence. For the first time in 6 years, I watched her realize my boundaries weren't suggestions. You have until tomorrow morning, I said. After that, I make my decisions with or without your honesty. I barely slept. Not from heartbreak, from clarity. You don't rest much the night you finally admit to yourself what you've been trying not to see. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Amber already there. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. My coffee maker hummed in the background like it didn't know our marriage was on life support. Her phone was sitting in the middle of the table. I unlocked it, she said, not quite looking at me. Her voice was flat, drained. Everything's there. It didn't feel like an act of love. It felt like compliance. I sat down, pulled the phone toward me. No speeches, no warm-up. My thumb went straight to messages. I scrolled until I saw his name. Chase Walker. My chest tightened, not from surprise, from confirmation. I tapped the thread. The first message at the top of the screen was simple. Hey, long time. Dated March. I swallowed, then dragged my finger slowly down the screen, letting the wall of blue and gray bubbles start to roll upward. Whatever was left of my denial went with it. The messages started off harmless. Old college stories, professors they hated, dumb jokes from back when life was cheap and simple. I saw names I recognized, places I'd heard in her stories long before we were married. If I'd only read the first couple weeks, I might have shrugged it off as catching up, but it didn't stay there. Slowly the tone shifted. They started talking about work, how exhausted he was with travel, how she felt stuck in routines. Then it became about marriage, about growing apart, feeling unseen, all the buzzwords people use when they want out but don't want to say it. Then I saw it. From Chase. Miss talking to you like this. A few bubbles later, her reply. Miss you too, more than I should. I just stared at that line, not because it surprised me, but because it told me everything I needed to know. She knew it was wrong. She knew it crossed a line, and she kept doing it anyway. It didn't feel like one big stab to the heart. It felt like 100 tiny cuts I'd never noticed, all hitting at once. I kept scrolling, my stomach in a knot, until I noticed something else. Little gray location tags. Lone Oak Coffee Roasters. Over and over again. Different Tuesdays, different times, same place. I opened the details. Messages would say things like, running errands across town anyway, might as well grab coffee, or meeting my sister near there, could swing by for a bit. Thing is, her sister doesn't live anywhere near Lone Oak, and every one of those errands lined up perfectly with my longest work days. Tuesday afternoons, the days I usually didn't get home before 7. There it was, 6 separate meetups. Same cafe, same ex, same lies. She hadn't just fallen into anything. She'd scheduled it, planned around my calendar, built a whole little secret life inside the gaps of my day. I sat back and let one truth settle deep in my chest. Married people don't meet their ex in secret coffee shops across town to talk about how unfulfilled they are. They call that what it is. Cheating. When I finally looked up from the messages, Amber was watching me like she was waiting for a verdict. She rushed in before I could even speak. We never did anything physical, she blurted out. Marcus, I swear to God, we never slept together. There it was, her last moral shield. Like as long as they kept their clothes on, everything else somehow didn't count. I exhaled. You really think that's the point? I asked. She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her space to spin it. You told him you felt trapped. You told him our marriage was stagnant. You talked to him about our sex life, our money, my flaws. You stayed up late so you wouldn't miss his texts. You met him in some cafe across town 6 different times while I was at work. Her eyes filled again, lower lip shaking. Amber, I said, my voice low but steady. Physical isn't the only way to cheat. You know that. I held up the phone. This is an emotional affair you planned and hid for months. I watched the words hit her. She flinched, like I'd slapped her with the truth. And for the first time, I said out loud what I'd already known in my gut. My wife had been cheating on me. The next day, the doorbell rang. I half expected a package. Instead, it was Natalie, Amber's sister, standing on the porch with that tight, determined look she wears when she's about to fix something. She walked straight into the kitchen like she'd been appointed judge and jury. Okay, she said, pulling out a chair. We all need to calm down and talk like adults. Marriages survive these things all the time. Amber sat beside her, eyes red, playing the part of the wounded spouse. I stayed standing. Do they? I asked. Natalie frowned. Yes, people make mistakes. People feel lonely. It doesn't have to be the end of a 6-year marriage. I nodded slowly. Sure, people make mistakes. One bad night, one stupid decision. I get that. Then I looked her straight in the eye. But tell me something, Natalie. Do they survive 4 months of planned deception? The room went quiet. She glanced at Amber, then back at me, and I saw it. Her realizing this wasn't a drunk kiss at a bar. This was a pattern. Scheduled calls, secret meetings, lies layered on lies. In that silence, it stopped being a rough patch and became exactly. I sat down at the table across from both of them, Amber and Natalie, and for once I didn't feel like the one on trial. All right, I said. You want to talk about saving this marriage? Here's what that actually looks like. They went quiet. Number 1, full access. Phone, email, socials. Anytime I want. No warning. No, let me explain first. You don't get privacy for secret relationships while you're married to me. Number 2, complete transparency. Where you go, who you're with. Not because I like tracking people, but because you broke the trust that made not tracking you possible. Number 3, counseling. Real counseling. where you don't sit there and blame our marriage for choices you made. You own it." Amber swallowed hard. Natalie looked between us, realizing this wasn't rage. This was a man who'd thought it through. "And there's one more thing," I said. "By Sunday night, you cut Chase off completely. No contact, no just friends, nothing." I held her eyes. "By Sunday night, you choose, this marriage or him. If you don't, Monday morning I file for divorce." For once, nobody had a comeback. Sunday felt like a week. She barely spoke all day. No music, no TV, just the sound of her pacing the hallway and my own thoughts replaying everything I'd read on that screen. That evening, I found her on the couch, curled up with her phone in both hands like it was some kind of lifeline. "I'm doing it," she said quietly, without looking up. I stood a few feet away and watched her thumbs move. The message was long, stuff about needing to focus on her marriage, about things going too far, about how they couldn't talk anymore. She hit send, then opened the contact info, scrolled down and hovered over one little red word. Block. Her finger shook for a second before she tapped it. She took a screenshot of the last messages, the blocked screen, and handed me the phone like evidence. "It's done," she whispered. Her eyes were glassy, not with relief but with loss, and that told me exactly where her heart still was. I nodded, but inside a question burned. Did she end it because she wanted me, or because she was afraid to lose the life I'd built for us? The first week after she blocked Chase, Amber flipped a switch. Every night after dinner, she'd slide her phone across the table toward me without me even asking. Screen unlocked. Messages open. Like a dog laying down a bone it doesn't want to lose. She started planning movie nights, Googling easy weeknight recipes, and cooking like we were back in our first year. Asking about my projects at North Star, actually listening, laughing at stories she used to roll her eyes at. It was all very textbook. Hold his hand, ask about his day, hand over the phone. Don't get me wrong, I noticed the effort. I'm not made of stone. Part of me wanted to just exhale, to believe this was real change and not just panic. Some nights, looking at that phone sitting in the middle of the table like a peace offering, I caught myself thinking, maybe we can rebuild. Maybe this doesn't have to be the end. But even while I was thinking it, there was this thin layer of caution over everything, like a film on water. Hope was there, but it was standing next to something else I couldn't quite name yet. Then the details started. "I ran to Target around 3, she'd say. Lines were crazy. I was in self-checkout for like 15 minutes. Here, look, the receipt's time-stamped 342. Then she'd pull up her bank app, show the charge, show the location. Every move came with documentation. At first, I appreciated it. This was what I'd asked for, right? Transparency. But after a while, it stopped feeling like honesty and started feeling like a report. Every day sounded like a status update from one of my job sites. Exact times, extra details nobody asked for, timelines so clean they felt rehearsed. And every time she handed me her phone, I noticed the same thing. A quick scan. Thumb flicking through recent calls and texts before she set it down. Just long enough to make sure nothing unexpected was visible. That's when it hit me. This didn't feel like honesty. It felt like a performance, like she'd figured out the rules of full transparency and was now gaming the system. I wasn't being let in, I was being managed. As part of this new full transparency plan, we turned on location sharing. Her dot, my dot. 2 little blue circles moving around North Dallas like that was going to fix what she'd already broken. I set notifications on my phone, then turned most of them off again. I didn't want to be that guy staring at a map all day, zooming in on parking lots, wondering who she was with. I still had a job to do. I still had a life outside this mess. So she narrated her days instead. Gym at 6, then Kroger. I'm grabbing stuff for dinner. Meeting Natalie for lunch at 1. I'll send you the receipt. On the surface, everything looked calm. No more late-night calls, no more mystery gaps, just a clean schedule, clean locations, clean stories. Too clean. I've managed too many construction projects not to know when numbers are being massaged, when reports start sounding polished instead of honest. And that's exactly what our marriage started to feel like. Not a relationship we were rebuilding, but a project I was supposed to sign off on, based on whatever data she handed me. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the auditor. Then came another Tuesday. Funny how it's always Tuesdays. Right after dinner, Amber wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, as casually as she could, "Hey, I told Lauren I'd help her move some furniture into her new apartment tonight." She launched straight into details. The dresser that wouldn't fit in Lauren's sedan, the bed frame that needed to be taken apart before her lease expired, the landlord being strict about move-out dates. It all sounded impressively prepared. "I'll probably be back around 9, maybe 10, she added. "You know how moving goes. Takes longer than you think." I just watched her. Every piece fit a little too perfectly. Time window, reason to be out, built-in excuse for being late. And of course, it was Tuesday, my longest work day. The same day her coffee with Chase had always lined up with my hours. But this time, I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand proof before she walked out the door. I just nodded. "All right," I said. "Drive safe." And in my head, I drew my own line in the sand. If she lies this time, I'm done. No more chances. No more explaining away patterns. Sometimes the only way to know the truth is to stop trying to stop it from showing itself. At 8:15 that night, my phone lit up. "Lauren." I answered, trying to sound normal. "Hey, what's up?" "Hey," she said, confused, a little annoyed. "Is Amber okay? She never showed up to help. I've been waiting since 6:30. For a second, the whole house went quiet in my head. "Oh," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Yeah, I'm sure she's fine. Maybe something came up. Thanks for letting me know, though." We hung up. I just stood there in the living room, holding the phone, feeling that familiar mix of anger and relief. Anger that I was right. Relief that I wasn't crazy. Then I opened the location app. One little blue dot. Not near Lauren's apartment, not even in the same direction. Lone Oak Coffee Roasters. Same spot, same day of the week, same time window. There's a special kind of quiet that hits you when the thing you were hoping you were wrong about lines up perfectly on a screen. My marriage wasn't healing, it was rehearsing. And this time, I wasn't going to pretend I didn't see it. I grabbed my keys. No slamming doors, no pacing the kitchen. Just picked them up, walked out to the garage, and started the truck. I didn't turn on the radio, didn't talk to myself, just drove through Frisco and out toward that same stretch of road I'd seen in her location tags too many times. On the way there, one thought settled in like concrete. This isn't about saving the marriage anymore. This is about saving myself. I parked a little ways down from Lone Oak, where I could see through the big front windows without being seen right away. And there they were, Amber and Chase, tucked into that same corner table like it had been reserved for them. Her leaning in, him smiling, both of them relaxed in a way I hadn't seen her in months. They looked like they'd been there 100 times before. No tension, no closure, just two people enjoying their favorite secret. I didn't go in. I didn't need a scene. I already had everything I needed. I pulled out my phone. If there's one thing my job has taught me, it's this: document everything. So I zoomed in and started taking pictures. Wide shot with the Lone Oak sign in the frame. Closer shot through the glass, clock on the wall in the background. Another one where you can clearly see Amber's face across from his. In one, she's laughing at something he said, hand resting lightly on her coffee cup, body tilted toward him. Not stiff, not guilty, comfortable. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't some tortured goodbye. This was her new comfort zone, her safe little bubble where I didn't exist. I sat there for another minute, phone in my hand, watching my own wife look happier with another man than she'd looked with me in months. Then I put the phone down, started the truck, and pulled away. I wasn't going to storm in there. I wasn't going to beg. And I sure as hell wasn't going to compete for my own wife. I already had what I needed. Proof for a court. And more important, proof for myself. When I walked back into the house, it felt different. Same walls, same furniture, same quiet. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't wondering anymore. I wasn't trying to give the benefit of the doubt. The doubt was gone. In the kitchen, I set my phone on the table and scrolled through the pictures one more time. Lone Oak sign, the clock, their faces. My thumb hovered, then I forwarded them to my email. Not out of pettiness, out of self-protection. Then I went to the bedroom, pulled a small duffel bag from the closet, and started packing. A few shirts, work pants, toiletries, important papers from my nightstand. Nothing dramatic, just enough to walk out if I decided to. I set the bag by the front door. Then I sat down in my chair in the living room, facing the entryway, and waited. No TV, no phone, just the ticking of the clock on the wall and the sound of my own breathing. Tonight, I thought, I decide what kind of man I'm going to be. A man who accepts this, or a man who finally walks away. Around 9:45, I heard her key in the lock. Amber walked in carrying a Bella Napoli bag like some kind of peace offering. Hair a little messy, fake tired smile on her face. Moving took longer than I thought, she said, kicking the door shut with her heel. You would not believe how much junk Lauren has. She set the pasta containers on the counter, acting like the thoughtful wife bringing home dinner after a long night of helping a friend, rattling off details before I even asked. We had to take the bed frame apart, then the dresser wouldn't fit through the door. Her elevator was slow, her landlord's a nightmare. Total disaster. I watched her talk, every line neat, every beat covered. No pauses to think, no gaps to fill. Just a smooth little story she'd clearly been rehearsing on the drive back. How did the move go? I asked anyway, like I hadn't already seen her at that cafe. She launched into more specifics, piling them up. The more she talked, the more I felt it, that sharp, quiet gap between what she was saying and what I already knew. So I let her keep going. Sometimes the best trap is the one they build themselves. When she finally stopped talking, I nodded slowly. That's weird, I said. Amber frowned. What is? Lauren called around 8, I answered, asking why you never showed up. The color drained from her face so fast it was like somebody flipped a switch. She didn't say anything, just stared at me. I picked up my phone, tapped the screen a couple of times, then turned it toward her. Call log. 8:15 p.m. Lauren's name, right there in black and white. She sounded pretty confused, I added calmly. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Without breaking eye contact, I slid my thumb and opened my photos. A few swipes, and there they were. Lone Oak's glowing windows, the clock on the wall, her and Chase sitting in that corner booth. I held the phone up again. Can you explain these? I asked. She sank down into the nearest chair like her legs couldn't hold her anymore, eyes locked on the screen. There was no wiggle room, no, you misunderstood, no, it's not what it looks like, because for once in this whole mess, it looked exactly like what it was. Amber finally tore her eyes away from the photos. It was just closure, she stammered. He needed to understand why I cut him off. That's all it was, Marcus. Just talking. I pointed at the screen. You look real happy for someone breaking a man's heart, I said. That doesn't look like goodbye. That looks like date number 7. She shook her head hard. You're twisting it. You don't get it. I was trying to end things the right way. I let out a short, humorless laugh. This isn't closure, Amber. This is cheating with better lighting. Her eyes flashed. You can't just throw away our marriage over this. You can't just walk away like that. I stood up. I'm not throwing it away, I said. You did that when you chose him. Again. After everything. After you promised. I took a breath, and it felt like the first real one I'd had in months. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You can't do that, she whispered. I met her eyes. I can, and I will. I'd rather be alone than disrespected like this for one more day. The next morning, I went to a small law office in a strip center off Preston Road. No marble floors, no fancy lobby, just a receptionist, a coffee machine, and a lawyer who specialized in getting things done clean and fast. I want a straightforward divorce, I told him. No kids, no house together, just end it. He slid a legal pad toward me. Tell me everything, he said. So I did. The late-night calls, the texts, the cafe meetings, the second round of lying after closure. Then I pulled out my phone and handed it over. Screenshots, timestamps, location logs. He nodded, methodical, already organizing it in his head. While he made copies, my phone buzzed. Amber had started her own campaign. texts from her mom, a missed call from Natalie, a friend of hers sending a long paragraph about how he's overreacting and she was just lonely and you shut down emotionally. In their version, this was a cry for help, a misunderstood wife, an emotionally distant husband. In mine, and in my lawyer's folder, it was 4 months of documented deception and a repeat offense. I left the office with signed paperwork and a quiet promise to myself. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story of what she'd done to me. After I filed, Natalie started calling almost every day, sometimes on her lunch break, sometimes late at night after Amber had finished crying on her couch. Same opening line, every time. Marcus, 6 years together has to mean something. And she's right. It does. It does mean something, I told her one evening, sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of legal papers in front of me. It means I know exactly what your sister is capable of. She sighed. She's a mess, Marcus. She knows she screwed up. But people come back from this. People heal. You can't just... I cut in, still calm. Natalie, stop calling it a mistake. A mistake is one bad decision on a bad night. This was 4 months of lies, then a second round after being given a chance to fix it. Silence on the line. The issue isn't that she made a mistake, I said. It's that she made the same choice, over and over. That's not confusion. That's who she decided to be. I heard her breathing. Nothing else. We both knew the truth. She wasn't trying to protect our marriage. She was trying to protect her sister from the consequences of it. While the paperwork crawled through the system, we were still under the same roof. Those 30 days felt like living with 2 different people, switching shifts in the same body. Some mornings, Amber would corner me in the kitchen, tears streaming, voice cracking. I'll do anything. Let's go to counseling. I'll change my number. I'll quit my job if I have to. Just don't throw this away. Other nights, she'd come at me sharp. You just wanted out, she'd spit. You're using this as an excuse. A good man would fight for his marriage. You're running. I stopped defending myself. I didn't yell. I didn't list receipts and timestamps. I didn't argue with the version of me she'd built in her head. Every time I came back to the same line. You chose lies. I'm choosing to leave. Over and over, like a simple truth. And a strange thing started happening. The closer the court date got, the lighter I felt. Not happy, this wasn't a celebration, but clear, steady. She spun in circles, pleading one day, blaming the next. I got quieter, more certain. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what life would look like without her. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No dramatic wood paneling, no big audience. Just a judge, 2 lawyers, a clerk, and the wreckage of a 6-year marriage sitting at 2 separate tables. Amber went first. My husband shut down emotionally years ago, she told the judge. I felt alone. I made mistakes, but it was a cry for help, not cheating the way he's trying to paint it. I sat there and listened, hands folded, feeling strangely distant. Even now, she couldn't just say, I chose this. It always had to be because of something done to her. My lawyer stood up, laid out a neat folder on the desk. Your Honor, he said, we have several months of messages, location data, and photographs that show a sustained emotional relationship with a former partner hidden from my client, followed by continued contact after discovery. Screenshots, timestamps, Lone Oak, the HOA night, all of it. The judge flipped through, eyebrows tightening just enough to tell me she'd seen this pattern 100 times. No kids, no house together, no real assets to fight over. A few questions, a short pause. Then the judge signed, tapped her pen and said, divorce is granted. Just like that. It was legally over. I walked out feeling sad, but free. 8 months later, my life didn't look dramatic. It just finally felt like it belonged to me. At work, I got promoted to senior project coordinator. Same company, same field. But now I was the guy they trusted to run the bigger jobs. The kind of role you don't get if you're falling apart every day. Out there, on job sites and in meetings, I was the man people could count on. At home, I ripped out the old kitchen backsplash Amber had picked, painted the cabinets, swapped the fixtures, turned her old craft room into a home office with a real desk, bookshelves, and a door I could close at night without an argument. My friends started inviting me out again, And this time, I didn't cancel last minute because someone at home wanted attention and drama. We watched games, grabbed beers, hiked trails, nothing special, just normal. The house got quieter. No slammed doors, no late-night arguments over nothing, no checking location apps to see who my wife was really with. And I realized something one Sunday afternoon, sitting alone in my living room with a cup of coffee. For the first time in years, quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace of mind. Riley never crossed a line while I was married. After that night at the HOA meeting, she kept it simple. Polite waves, a quick hey when we grabbed mail at the same time, the occasional joke about how ridiculous HOA rules were. No flirting, no late-night texts, no, if you ever need to talk, nonsense. After the divorce, things shifted, but gently. We started talking a little more on evening walks. Then one Saturday she asked if I ever hiked the trails just outside town. Next thing I knew, we were spending some weekends walking dirt paths instead of HOA hallways, talking about everything except my ex-wife. Sometimes we'd sit next to each other at the new HOA meetings and share a look when someone brought up meeting conduct. Once she laughed and said, "Guess they'll think twice before auctioning off a spouse again." What I respected most was this. She never tried to slide into the space Amber left just because I was broken and available. She gave it time, gave me space. I don't call it a love story. If anything, it's a respect story. She never saw me as a punchline, just as a person. When I look back on all of it, here's the part most people don't see. I was willing to forgive her, not blindly, not cheaply. I laid out clear conditions, full transparency, counseling, cutting him off. I gave her a path back, even after the first round of lies. And she still chose to lie again. That's what finally clicked for me. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the texts or the cafe meetings. It was the fact that when she stood at the crossroads between honesty and deception, even after being caught, she still walked straight back into deception. The biggest betrayal wasn't what she did with him. It was what she decided I was worth. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was easy to leave. It wasn't. The house was quiet. The bed was big. Some nights, the loneliness felt like a second skin. But I can tell you this with a straight back and a clear conscience. Self-respect isn't free. You pay for it with hard decisions. And I'm proud I didn't stay with someone who treated my dignity like it was negotiable, just because I was afraid of sleeping alone. One Saturday afternoon, I was doing something completely normal. Grocery run at Kroger. I was pushing my cart down the produce aisle, trying to remember if I was out of eggs, when I saw her. Amber. She was standing by the discount bin, bruised apples, bagged salad with yellowing edges. Her cart was mostly store brands and sale stickers. She looked smaller, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. She noticed me and forced a smile. "You look good," she said. "You look happy." "I am," I answered. Simple. True. She started talking. Fast, like if she stopped, she'd break. "I'm working at the real estate office during the day and waiting tables at night. Rent's insane. Between gas, bills, everything. I'm barely keeping up." I listened. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't enjoying it. Part of me felt a little sorry for her. Another part felt nothing at all. No punch in the chest, no wave of anger, no urge to fix anything. Just distance. Somewhere between the lettuce and the potatoes, I realized I didn't love her. I didn't hate her. Whatever I used to feel had burned out. All that was left was the quiet understanding that we were done. Amber looked at me for a long second, then said softly, "You were a good husband. I didn't see it." She stared down at her hands on the cart handle. I keep thinking, if we'd gone to counseling earlier, if I'd been more honest, if I hadn't, She trailed off. Maybe things could have been different. I nodded once. "Maybe," I said. "But that's not what happened." I took a breath. "You didn't lose me because you wanted something better, Amber," I told her. "You lost me because every single time when it came down to honesty or lies, you chose lies." She winced, but she didn't argue. "I'm not glad any of it happened," I went on. But I am glad it ended before we bought a house together. Before kids. Before there was even more collateral damage. She swallowed, eyes glossy. I really did throw it away, didn't I? She whispered. I gave a small, tired smile. You wanted something different, I said. You just didn't know the price. Then I shifted my hands on the cart and started pushing it toward the checkout, leaving her standing there under the bright supermarket lights, between the sales signs and the sound of scanners beeping, right in the middle of the life she'd chosen. When I look back, it's wild how it all started. One stupid joke at an HOA meeting, my wife trying to auction me off in front of 30 neighbors, Riley saying, "I'll take him," and Amber's smile cracking right there under those fluorescent lights. From that night at Stone Ridge, to catching her emotional affair in text messages, to seeing her back at Lone Oak after promising it was over, she didn't just cheat with a person, she cheated with a pattern. Twice. In the end, I didn't win. I didn't lose. I just chose me. I learned that boundaries aren't selfish, that being married doesn't mean you have to accept disrespect just because you've already put in years. And if you take nothing else from my story, take this line. I'd rather start over alone than stay with someone who treats honesty like an option. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you stay or walk away? Drop a comment, pick your side, share this with someone who needs the wake-up call. And if you want more real stories like this, hit subscribe and stick around.